Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. Today, we're going to talk about the victim saboteur in depth. And before we get started, I just want to remind everyone and acknowledge that all the content in this video is from the book Positive Intelligence by Shirzad Chamine. And this the content comes from his book and from his programs. And I'm a certified positive intelligence coach, and I teach the boot camps that are part of this program as well. So today we're going to go in depth onto the victim saboteur. We're going to learn a little bit more details about this saboteur, and we're going to talk about how the saboteur develops, the characteristics, the thoughts, the feelings, the justification lies. What that means is what's the voice inside you that says that you need this saboteur, the impact on self and others, and then how to coach yourself to shift. So let's start by talking about how the victim saboteur develops. So usually the children that develop into adults with a victim saboteur start out as naturally sensitive, introspective, and perceptive. They easily see uniqueness in themselves and in other people. So they're highly attuned to emotions, and that includes deep and negative emotions. So they're very aware of the distinctions between the different types of emotions. And I know some of the other types, or the people that tend towards maybe hyper-rational or hyperachiever, or some of the other saboteurs, often we are not as in tune with our emotions. So we may feel triggered, but we may not actually know what the feeling is. But someone usually who has the victim saboteur as their main saboteur and kind of grew up with this profile tends to be very, very tuned into their emotions and can distinguish between anguish and desperation, for example. So they're also very courageous about tapping into their emotions. So while some of us are kind of afraid to go there, this type tends not to be afraid. They tend to be able to get right into emotions deeply, and that can actually make them extremely compelling because they can use that emotion to connect. And they can use it to be inspiring, they can use it to be healing. And although sometimes it can come across as a little bit dramatic. They may not have felt seen or accepted as a child and learn to use drama to squeeze out a little bit of attention. They may tend to feel more alive when swept up in strong emotions. So there, again, when we talk about how these sort of map to the Enneagram, there's certain ways that different types feel alive. And for this particular profile, often being swept in and feeling those really deep, strong emotions is kind of what also brings a feeling of aliveness. Whereas like the Enneagram 8, when you're feeling active, that's when, or when you're in conflict with someone, that's when you tend to feel alive and come alive. So there's certain things that make us feel alive and come alive. And so this type tends to have sort of naturally, as a child, been very in tune to deep emotions and been able to tap into them and, you know, kind of feel alive. So it's become a strength. And then, but then as they've grown older, they tend to overuse it, which then develops into the victim saboteur. So when you're overusing these strengths, the characteristics of someone who is hijacked by the victim saboteur tends to be that when they start feeling criticized or misunderstood, they tend to withdraw. They might pout, they might sulk. They can be very dramatic, very moody, very temperamental. When things get tough, they often want to crumble and give up. They tend to have this repressed rage, and that results in depression, apathy. They can be tired a lot. They may not realize it, but they have a little bit of an attachment to having difficulties. Again, because they tend to be able to squeeze a little bit of aliveness out of that. And then they tend to get attention by having emotional problems or being temperamental or sullen. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way here. All right, typical thoughts when you're being hijacked by the victim saboteur. And I think everybody has a little bit of this saboteur in us. Sometimes it's hard to find because we have kind of a negative perception of the word victim. So we tend to sometimes not find this saboteur in us until a little bit later on. But the typical thoughts are no one understands me, bad things happen to me all the time. So kind of like, why does this always happen to me? This kind of exasperation and true belief that just negative things, just magically come to me. And sometimes wondering, what's wrong with me? Do I have a unique flaw, or is there something wrong with me that makes me not the same as other people in the world? There's also a deep connection to those emotions again. So I tend to identify more with my emotions than other types. And a lot of times there's this wish and this hope that someone stronger or more powerful would rescue you or take care of you or pull you out of the mess that you're in so you don't have to deal with it yourself. Feelings. So someone who's hijacked by the victim saboteur tends to spend a long time brooding over negative feelings. They tend to often feel alone and lonely, even when they're around people that they may have close friendships with. They feel melancholy. They can feel a sense of abandonment. The other thing is that this type often doesn't feel bad when feeling melancholy. There's almost a sweetness to it sometimes. So melancholy can be kind of almost a positive feeling. And then they're plagued a little bit with envy and negative comparison. So they do have a tendency to compare themselves to others, feel like they're on the short end of the stick, and somehow kind of feel that the grass is greener somewhere else. So get a little bit resentful as they compare themselves to others. Now, one of the lies in your head that tell you that you need this victim saboteur, I think a lot of times people in this category tend to feel like they're not naturally going to get a lot of love. And sometimes they confuse self-pity with self-love. So sometimes it's like the way to get love is for people to feel sorry for me. And so it almost feels like if people aren't feeling sorry for me, then I won't get any love at all or any affection at all. And I actually personally resonate with that because I remember as a child, sometimes my mom would get nicer all of a sudden if she felt sorry for you. And I remember definitely noticing that. The other thing is that sometimes sadness feels noble, like you're sad on behalf of the world or the bad things that are happening in the world. So you feel sort of noble and sophisticated about your compassion for all the bad in the world. So this might be the type of person that says, there's so much bad in the world. How could I possibly be happy? Like it might be almost disrespectful of the sadness in the world and the pain in the world for me to be happy. So there's a little bit of that, seeing that sadness as a sign of emotional depth or insight or sensitivity. The impact on yourself and others when you're hijacked by the victim saboteur. Unfortunately, a lot of life vitality is wasted because there's so much time spent processing and brooding and trying to figure things out and kind of feeling sorry for yourself or contemplating why you're on the short end of the stick or wondering what's wrong with you. And sometimes this shows up too much in friendships. And so it backfires by pushing people away. So instead of getting that closeness that you get, you might get some people who are naturally, relating to pleasers and wanting to serve and wanting to help, kind of coming in and wanting to make things better from you. But what ends up happening is it doesn't work. And eventually they just get worn down by what they feel is the ongoing negativity. So they either feel helpless or guilty, and they can't really be in a relationship with you because they feel like there's nothing they can do to make you happy. So how do you intercept the victim saboteur? What are some things that you can do in yourself when you're hijacked by that victim saboteur to sort of separate yourself and move to sage? Well, first of all, you really have to separate yourself from your emotions and understand that even though sometimes these negative emotions make you feel alive, they aren't you. And that dwelling in them actually doesn't help you discover yourself. So a lot of times we think that we're discovering ourselves because we're really in tune to our emotions, but our emotions sort of come through us and they come in waves and their energy that comes through us. And the real us is not our emotions. So if you really want to do self-discovery, if you really want to get deep, you can say, wait a minute, my emotions may be confusing me and confounding things and making it harder for me to see who I really am. Thinking about the hand on the hot stove, you know, Shirzad always says negative emotions are very useful, but only for a second as a signal. So if you're feeling a negative emotion, you should know that you're hijacked, right? So you might feel it for a second and then kind of look around and see if there's a real threat there. But as soon as you've looked around to see if there's threats there, there is no point in dwelling in emotions that feel negative. The other thing is that the thinking is always, there's something wrong with me. There's a flaw there. You know, everyone else does this so easily and it's so hard for me. Everyone else, some of my victim thoughts are everyone else knows how to clean their house and, you know, here I am and I'm not keeping it as clean, or everyone else does this easily. And I hear this in my clients too. They'll say, well, everyone else does it this way and I don't. So when you're hearing those voices in your head, everyone else has it easy, or everyone else is doing this well, and I'm not, that's the victim hijacking. And it's not the truth, it's a lie. You have to understand that you're having a human experience when you fail, and everyone else does have moments of failure and despondency and just not making it and not having a good day. And so even if on the surface they look like they have it all together, that's just surface, and that's not really an indication of their life. This thinking pattern again tends to focus on uniqueness and trying to find the uniqueness in myself and trying to find it in others. And sometimes there's almost a resistance to being ordinary, because if I'm ordinary, then I'm, you know, then that makes me not unique. And I don't want to get lost in being ordinary. A lot of artists, artistic people will fit this profile. And there's kind of this ongoing search to find my uniqueness, to find how I'm special. But the paradox here is that, yes, all of us are unique. We're all completely unique. There's no human being that is like any other human being, but at the same time, 99% of what we experience is common. So we have a lot in common. So a good question to ask yourself is, how could you celebrate your uniqueness without needing to create separateness? Because when you start pushing others away in order to be special, you actually create specialness and you kind of create your own aloneness. And so that is when we get to really, really using the strength of introspection to question yourself on how the belief system becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, you know, when you begin to think no one understands me or cares about me, or you're complaining a lot, you end up making these things come true just by virtue of dwelling on them. So when you interpret people's actions or words selectively to show that they don't care, eventually, if you keep accusing someone of not caring about you, eventually they stop caring about you. If you withdraw too much to test others and kind of manipulate them into coming after you when you're withdrawing, that can get exhausting for other people. And eventually, if they have good boundaries, they won't come after you. So these types of thinking patterns tend to result in pushing people away instead of bringing people closer. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy again. Oh, I told you so, people don't care about me. But the reason that people are kind of abandoning people who are hijacked by the victim saboteur is because of the negative energy and the withdrawing and the things that may make someone come to you temporarily to see if you're okay, but over time, if they're healthy, they're going to create a boundary. So that's the price that you're paying to prove yourself right over and over again, that people don't care, that there's something wrong with you, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes, because there's a strength of introspection here, kind of thinking through all those things, really thinking what's the price I'm paying, can help you catch yourself and separate from that. Some other things that you can do from a positive intelligence program, you can play the yes and game. So when you're starting to feel that fall into a negative perspective, you can say, okay, well, I believe this, but let me take the opposite perspective. 10% that this is a good thing that's going on, 10% that I'm not uniquely flawed. Maybe I'm uniquely, maybe there's a good thing in this, or maybe there's something good about me. So looking for the gift in the sad things, looking for the gift in your own history of kind of this dwelling and moodiness. So not beating yourself up for having the victim saboteur, but looking for the gift in having the victim saboteur can actually turn you around and help you become less attached to that victim saboteur. So how can you convert that experience into a gift of connecting, teaching, inspiring, or healing, which are all things that the strengths of this characteristics that turned into the saboteur tend to be good at, okay? So, and what you really want to get into is not a place of incessant thinking, but no thinking. So that's kind of where the sage is completely present and non-thinking. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video. For those of you who are watching the recording, you know that you can always reach out to me personally if you have any questions, want to talk about this, get some coaching on it. But for those of you that are in the class, I'm going to stop the recording now and we are going to have a discussion.